Hello and good morning, and welcome to our panel, Get What You Give, the Rewards of Music Mentorship, presented by Perspective Forum and Film Music House. This is the first of 4 live panels this weekend. We'll have a showrunner, music executive, and music supervisor panel later today at 1 p.m. Pacific. And then tomorrow morning, we have a very special guest, the one and only Richard Kraft, who will talk about his career and his work as an agent. That's at 9:30 a.m. Pacific. And then at 11 a.m. a scoring for animation panel tomorrow. So please check the Perspective Forum page on Facebook for these panels, and also 10 more pre-recorded panels that we are posting today and tomorrow, all very it's a combination of workshops and panels. And at this point, I would also like to thank the awesome Perspective community for making this happen, but especially all the dedicated administrators who get the site going. Most of all, Adonis, who helped us tremendously with this event. A huge thank you. What we like to accomplish this weekend with those workshops and panels is to talk to composers, to music supervisors, executives, and have them give insights that are not necessarily techniques or scoring techniques, but additional tools they have learned over the years and they like to pass on, like meditation or how to prepare a piano, songwriting, etc. So please check out all the events. And now let's start this panel. And I'm happy to have 2 awesome guests with me here today. They have several things in common. First, they're both super amazing composers. They both won Emmys. Earlier this year, they both won an SCL award. And they both made it a mission to always take time for young composers and to mentor them. And most of all, they're both the most generous and kindest people I know. So please welcome Lolita Ritmanis and Carlos Rafael Rivera. Hello, Lolita.
Hey, great to be here.
Hey, Carlos.
Hi.
So before
Hello.
I hand off to you, Lolita is going to talk to Carlos for the first half hour or so. And then I'll come on around 11:30, 11:35 to take audience questions. So please, if audiences, if you want to put it in the chat room or just in the Q&A room, there is a button on the bottom right. And you can ask Carlos, you can ask Lolita, and I'll take the questions later. But without further ado, this is Lolita Ritmanis. I hand it off to you. Thanks again for doing that, and I'll see you later. Bye.
Well, it's such an honor to be here, Carlos, with you. Thank you to Perspectives and to White Bear for having us. And what an incredible topic. I was researching you a little bit, although I was very familiar with your work, but I thought I'm going to find out something interesting about Carlos. And I really did not know how much mentoring you had done and continue to do. And there's a quote that I found of yours that says, "Having spent the better part of my life making and teaching across musical genres, I know of no other way to so deeply feel the wonder of being alive." And I just thought it was so incredible that you included teaching in that. And can you let's just start a little bit let's talk about that. How does teaching impact you as a composer and this idea of having the wonder of being alive?
First of all, thank you for this, and everyone that's thanked Adonis and the folks at Perspective, and thank you to Thomas and White Bear, and what a privilege to talk to you, actually. So I'm just grateful that you're asking me any questions and I'm getting to interact with you at all. So thank you. I think that line came, I think there's a Yoda line, I can't remember, but it's from The Last Jedi, that I forget what he says at some point, where he says, he burns this tree down and Luke's like, "But you burned whatever." And he goes, they're just books or whatever. And then he says something about our students become what we could never be. They're supposed to be better than us. And I think that's been something, when I heard that, I was like, that's the goal, that's the gig. And I've always thought of teaching as the career. I was, along with the dreams of getting to write music for stuff, I always thought, well, if I get to do music at all and teach music and share music, that's going to be That's, that's the end game for me. Not like, well, I fell into teaching because, it's rough out there, which is kind of like a sort of mentality you can have. But I've been teaching since I was like could drive a car, because I would teach privately guitar to people here in Miami. When I grew up in Miami, then I moved to LA and I came back here like 10 or 11 years ago. And so my first, income was like teaching, going to someone's house and $20 an hour or whatever it was, and teaching them guitar in probably the late 80s. And so teaching was always like just part of the thing. And I always liked the idea of getting a chance to get in front of a group of people and share something I really loved or liked or was into, because I think we've all had it, and you probably had it when you went to school and you learned. There are kind of like two kinds of teachers. They're the ones that you get lucky to have, and then there's the rest, And there's the kind of teacher that you'll remember probably the name of the teacher that said something that just shifted you, right? They paid attention to you in a certain way, and that kind of changed your life, or changed or altered the course in which you thought things were going to go. And that was really one of the big goals of my life, was to get to be in a situation where I could share what I love and try not to lose the passion that we all have when we're students, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. The passion of being a student. I mean, I hope to be a student until the day I die, because
Exactly.
as soon as I lose that curious, that inquisitive kind of part of me,
Hmm.
it's also at times it's this feeling of, oh, am I always going to be the student? When am I going to be the expert and know everything? And
Yeah.
decade passes and another decade passes, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, my kids are, approaching 30.
Yeah.
I'm having a great career. I get to do this with you, and
Mm.
I guess I can wear both hats until the day I die. And I think it's fantastic that I don't know if our viewers, our participants realize that you actually taught guitar to the director of Queen's Gambit. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Tell us about that story. I mean, how absolutely amazingly cool is that?
Well, to keep it in line with the idea of teaching, like, if it's through teaching that I got to have this conversation with you, and got to meet Scott Frank. And the short of it, well, I'll make it, I guess, sort of rather somewhere in the middle. If you start getting bored, just do some sort of Zoom call or something, or interrupt me, or turn me off, or mute me. But I'll
Never,
try to keep
never.
no, I'll try to keep it brief. Like I was at a point where I had gone to USC to get my master's degree in composition, and like classical composition. And then I was also collaborating with a guy called Randy Coleman, and we had a band called Zoo Story, and we got signed. And when we got signed, I wasn't quite done with the master's degree. So I went up to the chairperson of the department. I don't know if he was a chair at the time. I think he was my composition teacher, Donald Crockett. And he was like, hey, you're young once, so maybe you should take this record deal and get out of here for a while. And he never said stay. He was like, go. And it was like the best advice I could have ever gotten. So I went, and it was like a 3-year journey of ups and downs. And it was like amazing, because I had all this money suddenly, and then I had none. And all of a sudden, I was just like really doing different kinds of jobs. I started building websites, doing all kinds of work. And I had breakfast with him, and he said, Carlos, have you thought of finishing your master's degree? And I was like, no. And he said, well, maybe you should just have that recital, because all I was missing was a recital, and get to it. And so once he brought me back to that, I had the recital, and he goes, have you thought of getting your doctoral degree? And I was like, no. And he's like, maybe you want to do that. So I really owe him so much, because he kind of helped shift my path from like becoming this, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life at 30 something. I was like 33 when all this was happening, or 32, or somewhere in that neighborhood. And all of a sudden it became focused. And with that focus, I made the decision to just make money making music. And it was just like very clear to me. I was like, as long as I get, because life had already happened at me. By then, I had been heartbroken with the record deal going south and everything not working out. That I was like, if I get a chance to do this, I'm gonna just stick to music. If I can be connected in any way through music, I'll do it. And teaching, which is the first thing I started doing, I went back to. So I shifted back, went to get the doctoral degree, and started teaching privately. And one of my private students was Scott. And that's like 17 years ago. It's a long time ago. And I walked into his studio and I saw the posters on the wall, and he was already a very well established writer. And I was like blown away because he'd done Minority Report, Out of Sight, and all these other films. But I never thought of it as, like, oh, here's my chance. You
Right.
know, does that make sense? Like,
But isn't that generally the case? Because
yeah,
you were doing what you do with passion, and you were just being yourself and comfortable in your own skin,
yeah,
and you were there, and you got to know you. It wasn't a motivated like this will be my path to success. But as far as to the film scoring world,
for sure.
what was the first? But that was Queen's Gambit wasn't the first project with him, was it? It was
No, it was A Walk Among the Tombstones in
right.
2012. It was like almost like 10 years after I had already known him and taught him guitar. So it's not like, you meet someone and then like the world, some people's life can change overnight, but this was never, I never thought as a career opportunism to be teaching Scott. I got lucky to teach him. And through the first 5 years or so, we became like friends, but I always felt like I was teaching music, not guitar to people. Like, it wasn't like it was a musicianship class because along with the Suzuki guitar that I was teaching to kids at the Pasadena Conservatory, I also started teaching like the history of the Beatles. And because I love the Beatles, and I was like, can we talk about the Beatles? So I did a whole Beatles history class. Then, can we talk about film music? And because I was such a fan still, and of course, a fan of film music, I created a film music class. I got to teach it with a guy called Bruno Kuhn, very cool guy. And we co-taught this class at the Pasadena Conservatory. We had a platform, we had people interested, and we taught it. And so I was involved with the idea. The biggest idols for me, teaching wise, have been always like Joseph Campbell, who has done these amazing stories, like the Hero of a Thousand Faces, the oh my God, I forgot so many other things, but the Power of Myth and other stories and books is amazing. And then of course Leonard Bernstein. And when I was studying composition, I saw and I read the unanswered question, the lectures at Harvard, and just I loved the way in which he talked about all these different things and something like emulated. Like you emulate anybody or anything you love, I was like a fan of them. So having a platform through teaching to do that was the way. And so my lessons were always kind of multifaceted as opposed to, the scale. Let's do scales now, if that makes any sense.
It's connecting to the human being and the spirit of that human being that actually to all of us that the reason we can create. I know for myself, I have been so fortunate to have some incredible private students this year, and also do a residency. And these students, these composers are just
Yeah,
kick-ass amazing.
I
So
am.
I think the biggest, I think, I think the biggest thing I've been able to contribute to their lives is not so much about, okay, let's talk about what string patch you use. I mean, that's like, okay, that's kind of, I'm sorry, that's a little bit boring.
Yeah,
But just to talk about how to navigate life and how to
yeah.
get in tune with the feeling of you are okay just the way you are. You don't have to follow the roadmap of, okay, I want to be exactly like this and this famous composer, and if I join this big music house, then that's going to be my ticket to success. And if you can take a moment to pause and really get in tune with what it is that makes you tick. And so
Hmm.
when I listen to you talking about, these mentors, you're talking more about life things, I mean, do you also do a lot, do you listen to other like philosophers and that kind of thing, or is that just by chance?
That was like what I think everybody does in their 20s. Like for me, I fell into Joseph Campbell in my 20s and early 30s. Same with Leonard Bernstein, and I felt like you all get. I think at those during that decade, if maybe it happened with you as well, but you kind of start picking lanes and you kind of see what it feels like. You know what I mean? Like you put on a suit or a dress or whatever you want to put on, and but you kind of try it on. You're like, I don't know. I don't know if this sort of like, condescending idiot role works for me. Or maybe you try the other very subservient person and just maybe the get run over kind of personality. See how that works. And you're not very much aware that you're doing it. You're just kind of living it, right? I mean, it must have happened to you. I mean, you've been a student. You can't, I'm just okay, can we just, let's flip over where you were a student of like Shirley Walker and that kind of, how have you felt a change from like student to teacher? Because just recently you were teaching. How has that worked for you? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, I actually did teach when I first moved to LA. I
Okay.
was 17 and a half, and I went into the Dick Grove School of Music. And to supplement my my living, I taught piano. I also played top 40. I mean,
Yes.
I just did all of this stuff, you know, and
Yeah.
I always had two parallel paths going on. I had my kind of industry path and then everything else. So I had
Yes,
my
right.
industry, and so um, I think in hindsight, my shyness really was an obstacle for me at first. And so so my path kind of tiptoeing in through music preparation, orchestrating, it allowed me to be a fly on the wall and kind of learn without kind of jumping in the deep end first. So I
Yeah.
mean, everybody's in a different space with that. Some people are just so charismatic and exciting right from the get-go, and many of us have to carry this like imposter syndrome thing, like
Yeah.
am I going to be found out that, you know, I'm just this, you know, this Latvian kid that grew up in Portland, Oregon, and used to hide in the corner, and you know, it's like, so I think Shirley was, of course, who, for those who don't know Shirley, you absolutely have to research Shirley Walker. It's
Yes.
Shirley was an icon, a trailblazer, and apart from being one of the most brilliant composers ever, she was such a generous and tough and kind and
Mhm.
everything in between
Wow.
mentor. So Shirley basically, I think more than music, she taught me how to be comfortable in my skin, and how to collaborate with people, and how to listen, and how to like stop talking this fast and be so hyperventilating. Just take a breath, just
Yeah.
listen at a spotting session, listen,
Yeah.
ask questions, be curious, be inquisitive. um, and I think it's magnificent that in this era, I mean, I was thinking of at the SEL Awards, because the SEL Awards this year, I just thought the nominees, the list of nominees was off the hook in all
It's
these
crazy.
categories. And
Yeah.
so many of the nominees also mentor.
Hmm.
So for
Yeah.
especially for our college grads whose parents might be freaking out that, oh my God, Susie's chosen to be a film composer. What is she going to fall back on? You
Yeah.
know, this is, I think you and I are testaments to the fact that you don't have to just, your path can be kind of a web of interesting like you can be like an octopus with tentacles reaching out to all some different areas, and that makes what we do more interesting, I think, in general, you
I
know.
think so. I agree also that you're just saying the octopus idea is something that's not said about because I don't know. I talked about this the other day with somebody, and our resumes are awesome. Right? Our resumes are like, mwah, they're just like oh wow, but they don't talk about all the junk that's not that builds that resume and all the things they have to do in between. Like, I mean, multiple jobs. When you said the octopus thing, I started thinking about how many jobs I did have at one point to make ends meet. You know, because you're committing to this thing, and no one talks about the waiter, the busboy, the whatever it is that you're doing, the valet, the person who fixes computers or builds websites or fixes, drives gear for bands. And at some point, I've done some of those things throughout this whole thing. I remember at one point I was working for a company called Taxi that would listen to music and give.
Right.
Do you know what
Yes,
I'm talking about? And
I know that company, yes.
yeah, and I had to drive out to God knows where. And I think when gas was starting to go up, it was becoming an expensive endeavor just to drive. But that was one of like 4 gigs I had. I was teaching at Pasadena Conservatory, teaching privately, and I think I was a TA at USC. And so this is the thing is like the decision is a hard decision. This music thing, you got to be insane to do it in the first place. Like the one thing I have learned, and that one thing as you mentioned about parents worrying about their kids, going into this, what I do tell parents is like, yes, you don't have to go to this institution. You don't really, they can learn everything on their own. They can't, like especially the availability that places like the SEL are making and other places are doing, and the availability of even different like library companies like avail all this information and knowledge. Why would you go and spend this kind of money? The difference is this. I think that when you choose to go to university or choose to go to an academic institution, you're going to be surrounded by like-minded people, which is maybe something that's not in the norm right now for this person who's considering it. You're going to be meeting probably the people you're going to end up collaborating with or know for the rest of your life in this career anyway. And if all else fails, you'll be a better person for it. Because one thing that music, and whether it's getting into pop singing or film scoring or whatever it is, makes you is a better person in the world because you're putting your stuff out there all the time and you're getting critiqued all the time. And what I mean by your stuff is like you're singing or you're performing and someone's saying that sucked, and they're going to say why, hopefully, and they're going to give you some advice, hopefully, right? But you have to get up the next day after a horrible, let's say, I don't know if you've had these, but I've had horrible lectures, horrible performances, horrible everything, and I go home and it's just I want to, let go of everything and become an accountant, and we have to get up the next day and we have to come back and do it again. And I can't think of any career where you constantly have to get up the next day and get in front of people again and share what you wrote and get critiqued. And in this gig of composing, oh my gosh, I mean, revision 24, right? I mean, it's like, how do you process that? And getting the grit or earning that is what makes you a better person. So let's say, you know what, I'm just done with this. There's two ways to go. You can be like the curmudgeon, sort of person, you become cynical, which is a thing we have to fight with age. And or you just go into the world. You know what? I am going to become I'm an accountant. But now hearing things and being able to collaborate with other folks, it's sort of what we're being trained to do. So we are better people in the world, hopefully, ideally. So anyway.
Yeah, I think the key is to, if you want to enjoy your life, is to not think about I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and then I will enjoy my life.
Yes.
Try to understand that this is not a rehearsal. I mean, it's that, this is not a dress rehearsal. This is it.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens in the next realm. I really don't. But at this moment, I have my tribe. My tribe are people that I would die for, that that are my best friends, my colleagues, my absolute number one people. For me, having gone through the Shirley Walker Mentorship Program, which wasn't an official program, but the fact that I gained my best friends, Michael McQuistion and Christopher Carter, who we then formed Dynamic Music Partners years later, but we have traveled this journey together as this team, which has been incredible. And we are there to support one another on our individual projects. When I was doing Blizzard of Souls, Mike and Chris were just so supportive and just constantly just like, yeah, go Lolita, go do your sessions, do it. We're so proud of you. And to have that kind of thing, have that team. I think students have that. I see it all the time. I see it with my kids. Two of our kids also went to USC. One was jazz studies, music industry, and our daughter got a master's in French horn performance. And their gigs and their connections are very much through the people that they went to school with.
That's right.
It's like, so I think it's a really wonderful thing. I see it in the Columbia students and in Kubi's students, that these composers, they kind of travel around as a group. I know that his second year students have just arrived in LA, and now they're in LA. And
exciting.
Come to LA.
Yeah.
What about that? So you're in Miami. I have students and I have composer colleagues and directors that live all over the world. Talk about how you've navigated that, because that's sometimes, I think, something kind of interesting. Just do you think it's how important do you think it is to be in any one specific location?
I think that it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think the question is never, I don't know if it'll ever change. Like, there's a couple ways to look at it. It depends on your personality type. I think it depends on how entrepreneurial you are. But if anything has taught us, the pandemic has taught us, this is a cliche statement, is that, you can work from anywhere, and you don't need to be, we're a global community. And the more entrepreneurial you are about reaching out to people, about finding out and networking, via these forums like Perspective or other ones. Hopefully, the one advice I like to give to students is start reaching out and for students of film music, of film making, of streaming, of TV, of just look for cinematographers, look for, people are going to be producers, look for people, establish those relationships as much as you're establishing your musical relationships, or the people you're going to lean on when things are getting rough. You want to kind of start now looking at that. Um, at at the Frost School, we are in Miami. We've had so many of our grads from decades ago have been working in the industry, and randomly many people end up going to LA. Some people go to Nashville, at least the popular music people. I was running that program as well for a while, and those students, they kind of do travel in a tribe. They travel like the graduating class go, well, like, are you moving to Nashville? Me too. Let's go together. And
Yeah,
then
right.
and they start that, and then there's like generational thing, like 2 or 3 year grads, and I'm like, hey, reach out to these alums. I know they're there. New York has a movement kind of thing going on as well, and LA does too. And I tend to keep in touch with the grads, with people who graduated, see how they're doing. Um, but the answer is I don't know. I would love to say it doesn't matter. Personally, for me, it hasn't made a difference. But had I not lived in LA in the first place, I would have never met Scott. So, you know what I mean? It's easy to
Right.
say, well, it doesn't matter. But I had my pre-established relationship before I got the opportunity to work with them, even though I was already living in Miami. So I I don't know. I know that if I was like 20 years younger, I'd probably have a better answer, you know?
Yeah, it's people ask me, but I mean, I did move here. I had the stars in my eyes, and it's like I had to be in LA, even though Oregon is not that far. But I do think, plane rides are now with COVID, hopefully becoming in our rearview mirror. I
Yeah,
think we will have learned a lot about ways to have meetings with, the Zoom thing and all that.
yeah,
It's not the same as being the fly on the wall, because we're always on stage now with the Zoom thing. So
that's right.
I do think it's important to have to make at least make regular pilgrimages to the places where everything's happening.
Right.
But one thing I have a feeling, I suspect that people listening to this would want to hear your thoughts about. What would your advice be to the student that you already said meet cinematographers and editors, but
Hmm.
indie film route or coffee route, bringing coffee at the big music production places and eventually printing stems or whatever.
And then, yeah, yeah, it's so funny. I am learning. Um, so I did when I lived in LA in '98, I did a mentorship, not a mentorship. Let me rephrase that. I did an internship, and it was at a time that it was my first summer between my master's degree, and I think it was maybe '98, summer '98. I'll be wrong, but whatever. And I ended up calling what was then called not remote control. Was it what's remote control now? Oh, Media Ventures. It was called Media Ventures.
Yeah, it's
And
remote now. Yeah.
yeah, it's remote. And so I called Media Ventures. I go, you guys are looking for interns? And they're like, yeah, sure, if you want to come by. And I
Well, it
just
was a yeah, short. I mean,
and
now
I
it's
was
like 300,
it,
400 letters
yeah,
or
it's like but that's how old I am. Let's put it that way, right? And so I showed up, and it was a great experience for me because I was sort of a fly on the wall. But at the time I was also studying classical music. So I had a different sort of, this is like, I'm learning how to film music, this is how it works. And I was able to get Jack in the Box for Hans Zimmer. I was able to meet some really kind people who later were assistants. We're doing that coffee route. And some of the people, and I remember specifically Justin Burnett and Nathan Barr, who's a really well-established composer. I had because we would hang sometimes with different folks, right? Especially with the assistants, right? And I remember I had done some sort of recording on classical guitar, and I had a cassette because back then cassettes were a thing. And they took this cassette and they made a CD for me and printed it back when CDs were unaffordable, like when you couldn't get a hold of a CD burner. So they burned it, and it had my name on it. And I was like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I don't know, they just did it to be kind. And I've never forgotten that kindness. So my experience was watching the process happen. People were kind to me. Mo Nakamoto was Hans Zimmer's assistant. And she was just like, the sweetest person ever, like ever. And she was like, "Hey, somebody needs to get their car fixed. Maybe you want to try to see if you can help them because maybe you get a chance to, you know what I mean?" She was looking out for the
right.
assistants. And so, but I didn't have my mind set on doing that because I was doing the classical thing. And that was right the year before I got signed, like I was telling you before, and felt when, so, but I do think the answer, hopefully now, that took like 2 or 3 minutes out of everybody's life. I'm so sorry. The answer should have been anything that you feel like you is comfortable. Like, I don't think there is one path. If you've noticed, if you follow your path, Lolita, what you've gone and done, or mine or anybody's, some people come up straight up through that thing. Some people come straight up and have a horrible experience and have to pivot. So, you know what I mean? And it just doesn't work for them. Because this is a business of personality relationships, is a chemistry that also has to be dealt with. And what you were talking about, how you work on preparing the students for life as opposed to just their technique or their ability. Craft is like 20% of this, I think. I
I
think it
think,
really,
well,
right?
I think I need my craft for the writing purpose, because
That's right.
people say, oh, how can you be inspired every day to write 5 minutes of music or however many minutes a day? Like,
Yeah.
well, I do have to rely on my craft. But when I really was in this, like, out of school, fresh out of school kind of thing, I didn't have to take one job. I was the octopus with tentacles, and that led to incredible opportunities. I mean, for me, the Michael Kamen experience was pretty off the hook.
That's
Um,
crazy.
it was at times I was just completely judgmental, like, how can he have not have this cue done? But then I would realize, oh, he's meeting with the director in the next room, and they're talking about things, and
Yeah.
and he'll get the cue done. And at that time, then, there were some of us that actually had to transcribe the music. It was there, this is pre DP.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but anyway, I learned so much, and I was thinking, if I had not been over there in Encino at his studio, then I don't think I would have, like, I wouldn't have the main title of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves on my wall, because I co-orchestrated, like, the first 10 pages are my orchestration, because he had to sleep before he conducted the next morning. So it's like those kinds of experiences happen because you are at the right place at the right time,
That's right.
and you're ready to
That's right.
go. So I see Thomas. Hey, Thomas.
I love that conversation, and I know we have so many audience questions, but we could go on just with the two of you for hours, but I also want to make sure we get to some of the audience questions. But before I do that, I want to say hello to the two of you from the Perspective Administrators and from Adonis, who just sent a note, and he wants to make sure that I also thank you for doing that. So thank you, and let's wave to Adonis in Cyprus.
Hey, Adonis.
All right. Okay, first questions. And the questions are for both of you. How can someone find a mentor, and what is the best way to go about that? And how do we approach a composer about becoming a mentor?
Lolita.
And I guess also an assistant in that sense.
Well, assistant, I think, is one thing. Mentorship, well, I actually would say you can pay for private lessons from a teacher. I mean, not everything has to be pick the top 10 grossing film composers and just work for them. I mean, look at people who are writing the music that you love, who have had longevity in their career, and see if they teach privately. That's one route. It doesn't have to just be like, oh, please, I'll do anything for you so I can be a fly on the wall and learn that way. I mean, all the times that I was I took private lessons from teachers, and then when I was actually working for other composers, I was being paid. When I was writing for other composers, I received cue sheet credit. So my story is maybe different a little bit than it is now. So I say you reach out to composers whom you admire. Don't send them a 45-minute demo. Don't tell them all about yourself. Just write a short little something, or call them and tell them how much you like their work. Contact them through their agent or something. It does, just don't burst it all out in one big, it's just too much. Because honestly, I don't know, Carlos, how many people approach you regularly, but I mean, I know there's some composers that just can't answer. They just can't answer all those long emails. If it's a short question or a short compliment, you'll get an answer. So, Carlos, do you have
I think it's funny because I mean, I was put on the mentor program, like I got into it and I coached a couple people like 2 years ago, like on the perspectives mentorship. And I think I stayed on it. So like a few weeks ago, I got like a bunch of requests and I had to write back to them and said, listen, I'm so sorry. I don't know. I was doing this before, but I'm not able to do it now. Just send me if you have anything, send me an email and just send me stuff. And if I can critique it, I'll do it. But the steps of mentorship, I haven't been able to get on. However, whenever I have someone reaching out about that, I will save their email and I have like a list of people. And when I can, I do write back to them and I say, hey, just checking in. But someone like, for example, Trevor Morris has really kind of stepped up into that. If you have someone saying, hey, I'm ready to mentor, take that opportunity.
Carlos, Trevor's going to be inundated now with another.
I kind of knew that was going to happen. I'm just trying to get Trevor.
Who else? Yes, who else can we get?
But
reach out. I would say reach out if you're interested in orchestrating. Reach out to the orchestrators who are orchestrating for the projects that you find interesting. If you are incredibly great at programming, I mean, don't look just at the very top person, because you will actually, by becoming an intern's assistant.
Yeah.
Hey, I think that's a great, alumni thing too. Like we were talking about earlier, reach out to your peeps that are working for other people.
That's for sure. The alumni thing, I notice even with some students who have gone on to work and assist other composers, their network is aware that they're doing that. So hey, if they need help, they kind of go to the people they know. It is a relationship thing, but I everything you said is fine. I don't think I have anything to add to it. I think you were just great at how you presented what they should do. It's a process, and hopefully everybody finds their way. It's just, I do think there is a weird line where you want to make sure you're not crossing it. And I think you also said it, so I may be redundant, but don't do the long thing. Just focus on the person you're interested. And for the love of God, don't just reach out to these people because they have a name. Study their work. Know what they do, right?
Right.
Yeah,
so
I'd like to add, you mentioned Trevor Morris and the Perspective Mentorship Program, which people can do on their Facebook page and apply for. But then there's also other organizations. The Alliance for Women Film Composers has a mentorship program that usually starts in January, and applications are open in the fall. The Society of Composers and Lyricists has a mentorship program for composers and songwriters. There is ASMAC for orchestration. There is, the programs by ASCA, BMI, and CSAC. So be resourceful. And also, I cannot stress enough, get out of the composing world. You might also want to do a little internship with a picture editor or, a script. This is a collaborative field we're working in. And I really find it very important not only to do mentorship with composers, but to also learn other parts of our industry that I think might get you jobs, but also help you with understanding where a picture editor, a director, or a music editor is coming from. So
yes, that's great.
Another question. I consistently find myself making great music when I'm emotionally invested in it. Some part of me tells me this isn't a healthy way to approach my craft, especially if I'm wanting to do full-time composing. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. So if you're not emotionally invested in a piece, in work, do you still do it? And how do you go about that?
Lolita.
Oh, I was going to say Carlos. Well, okay, what's the politically correct thing to say is, of course, you have to be emotionally invested in everything that you do. But there's maybe that one cue where it's just, the scene is poorly edited, or you just know everything's it's not happening. And so you have to save it. You don't really like it. So find something about it that can draw you in. It's like, I have been hired to make this better, or to add something to it. So use it as a challenge. Don't think, oh, this scene sucks, or this film isn't very good. Think about, you've been chosen. What an honor that is. And, if you struggle with that kind of thing of not being emotionally invested, I don't think this is the business for you, really. I mean, you are going to have to be face a firing squad of studio executives. If you're doing like kids animation, you might even have opinions from the toy companies. You're going to have music supervisors giving input, directors, producers, and they may not all agree either. So the easiest thing for them to do if they don't like what you're doing is just to hire somebody else. So being engaged, being interested, and getting kind of past your own insecurities with that thing with the needing to be so emotionally invested. Of course, you want to be emotionally invested. So just latch onto something. Carlos, you must have some stories to tell.
No, I mean, I think it's the same thing. I do notice that there's a sort of a theme emanating from the questions in a way. It's like when you're a student or you're starting out, music in your perspective feels like it's the center of the universe, and music is the sun, and you are the sun around which all these other elements, the director, the producers, and the suits, and this total. You're a satellite around a moon around a moon, and then there's the sun is the people who are financing this always, and so your sense of self-importance is kind of something that you have to learn to throw out the window as soon as possible. I'm glad that I'm 50 doing this work now, because 20 years ago I would have probably been insufferable or probably wouldn't have lasted, because you have to realize that this is not about you, and you are not your music. And if you learn that, and I'm still learning it, you become better at this. It's a craft. I don't think it's art. It's hard for me to say that I'm an artist, or I think that there are moments and things that you do that you can look back, go, I think that's pretty artful. That could be considered. But if you're thinking from the beginning that I'm an artist and I'm going to do this, and unless the muse comes to visit me, I can't create a gift to the world, you're kind of screwed, I think. And I think you have to learn to make the craft the focus, like good at what you do. Version 27 of a cue, no problem. Let's go, because it's not about you. We're a service industry. We are always serving someone else's vision. And that's the first thing to kind of address regarding the question you had about if I'm not emotionally invested, it's not about you. It's about how good are you at making someone else care. Um, yeah, I could keep going, because this is like I wish this wasn't water. Let's put it that way.
But I wanted to just add one more thing, because both you and I also have in common the fact that we write music for the concert stage.
Yeah.
And so there's what you do. So, you should never, as a composer, if you feel like it is wearing you down and you just hate what you're doing, you're in the wrong business. But if you learn how to collaborate and be excited about working with filmmakers, that's one part of your life. It doesn't mean you have to turn off the part of your life that at midnight you have this great idea for this incredible song, or you get a commission from an orchestra. Please do that. And if during hiatus, during times when you don't have that, that's the best time. I actually say, I think some of my biggest accomplishments have been passion projects that I never thought would turn into any kind of, public accolades. I mean, I just did it because I had to do it. So.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and I think one thing, there's one thing not being emotionally invested in a specific cue or, in a project. And, there's always the opportunity to say no if you feel like this is not that I'm connecting with. But I think there's also, this philosophy of in the past few weeks, talking to Miriam Cutler, Wendy Blackstone, who really crafted their careers, for example, in doing documentaries, because that not only fulfills them on a music level, but also their passion for activism, for storytelling, for making a difference in the world. So, I think, a composer career, there's so many paths you can choose and options to do for work. So maybe, if maybe the horror genre is not where you emotionally invested, maybe then you want to find a different piece in that composing career. It doesn't mean you have to give up, but there's so many options. So your passion for life and for activism, for example, and composing can marry, and you can do that. And
Yeah,
while
awesome.
you go there, you might, as you said, Lolita, do work beside composing for film and television and write for the concert stage or for a ballet or for a fashion show or just for your friends. So you fulfill that need that you might not always fulfill with the paid gig. That's what I
And
think.
plus, that's a coolness factor, actually. I've gotten some gigs because of like, oh my God, you had a piece at Carnegie Hall. How cool is that? It's like, okay,
No,
we want
it's
to
super
hire.
cool.
Yeah, it's kind of like,
and
or
that's
if you, or you can get a commission. I think it was interesting. I'm not going to say who told me this, but there's a colleague of mine who said with concert commissions, this composer gets quite a few, and it was, well, sometimes it's a coffee cup commission, and sometimes it's a actual
Yeah,
monetary. So as long as you're getting a cup of coffee from the person commissioning the work, I've been commissioned to write a cello concerto.
exactly. It's
No
cello
one's gonna,
concerto.
no one's gonna ask you if you're making $1,000 a minute or you got a really good cup of Starbucks. No one's gonna ask.
No, but
That's
I love
beautifully
what you
said.
said. By following your passion. I think Blizzard of Souls is such a great example where you did this independent film, foreign film, and then you're on the Oscar shortlist. You are, your work is performed at Lincoln Center, Carlos, Cincinnati, concert halls all over the world. It's by following, you never know where it's going to lead. So I think you have to do a combination. Yeah, you have to look for money, but then also those passion projects, you never know where it's going to lead. Next question. You both talk about mentoring new students and talent. Do you find yourself taking inspiration from these new students and working it into your own music? Jack asked that question.
Lolita.
Okay, Carlos.
It's gonna be every time.
Well, I will say something. I mean, these the 4 private students that I had this semester, USC private students, Yiren, Wang, Jamie, Mario, and Muye. I was my jaw was on the floor a lot of the times at these private lessons. It's like, oh my God, how great are you guys? You guys are just amazing. And so that's when I kind of it's more like a kick in the pants. It's like, oh my God, I better step up my game here. These kids are just gonna just outright me. I better work really hard. I mean, the technology is so incredible now too, that people that have you can get stuff to sound really good. I think it's less. There used to be a big chasm between the students that would graduate and they have these crappy sounding demos. I mean, these things they're pretty incredible. I mean, kids coming out of Berkeley and Frost and Columbia and what's Jeff's school called at Eastman? Jeff Beal School, is that the film scoring program? I mean, the film scoring program. Yeah, it's amazing. So of course, inspiration, but more, I learn more about myself because I kind of see some of the vulnerabilities in the students. It takes me back to how I felt back then. And that's where, I mean, I'll get all emotional because I think, gosh, if I can touch somebody's life in the sense that they feel okay about what they're doing, or they feel like there's a safe space to talk. I think it makes me a better person. So I'm very grateful to the students for sharing their heart, because it makes me a better person and a better composer.
That's beautifully said. Yeah, I agree 1,000%. I mean, teaching for me is one of the things I really do get. I do get most of it. A couple things. Selfishly, I do stay somewhat current with what they're listening to because they're always 18 to 22 or whatever, and the grads go up to 30 or whatever, or around, and some are older. But I'm always listening to music that otherwise I wouldn't be listening to. Second of all, I also know I love the fact that when we have projects and we have like 10 students in the class, I'm listening to, for the same scene, 10 different versions of a cue. And so I am learning. I'm learning from what I am considering to be the mistakes they're making. I also try to empower them to learn to critique, and I empower them as much as I can to learn to take it. And it's a brutal room. I try to be as brutal as we can, because we do kind of keep saying that it's about the music. This isn't you. And because as you've been through so many of these, Lolita, like you said, I love when you said firing squad, right? And it's sometimes a toy company that's giving you the notes, or you're like, what is this? Getting used to the fact that at the end of the day, you're going to have to change it, period. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have all is said and done when you just vented out and lashed out or whatever, you get home, you're going to have to rewrite it. And that kind of concept, getting that in their heads and is really important, I think. And I think I also, I get to share with them all my mistakes. And so that's the best thing I can do. I do think that if I were to go back in time, and you said that when you wish some people told you certain things when you were young, but maybe sometimes people did and you just weren't ready to listen. I do think that the best experiences are the ones that when you run into the wall yourself, no matter how many times you've been told that, and getting to witness that is also something I get a lot out of. And it's just I love the process. I do get so much out of teaching. So I'll shut up.
Carlos, can you elaborate a little bit what you just said about criticism? Because we have a question about that. And how do you personally best take criticism? And do you ever defend your compositions, or do you always change your work based on the notes?
No, I think it's the best way to go. I think the best way to go is just change it. Nothing is precious, and the sooner you learn that nothing is precious, first of all, I think the safer thing to say would be to pick the hill you're going to die on, right? And it's got to be a hell of a hill to die on, because the truth is you're not the maker of the story. You're helping whoever is hiring you to tell the story, and you do not have the perspective that they do. You do not see it the way they do. As much as you want to, your job is to try to bridge that gap as much as you can by collaborating, communicating, understanding. But if you start going like, well, you don't understand, I picked a minor key for this because I had a major key presentation when they were doing well, now they're doing badly, and you start going down this musical reasoning for why you're just being insecure about having to redo it. Do you know what I mean? Just do it. Just shut up and write it. I mean, that's what it comes down to. This, you just have to deliver and make the client happy. And it goes back to the other thing that we're so stuck on, it being art, because you can't touch it, because it's ephemeral, and it's music, but it's just a skill like any other skill. And the more you work on it, the better at it you get. And believe me, I've come to this realization for me. I'm not saying it should be. Some people want to say, no, I do art. That's what I do. Great. That's good. But I did ride that horse for a long time, and I fell off too many times to try to get back on it anymore. And I just realized I just make things. And if it gets approved, great. And if it stays and has some for some reason, it kind of goes past the project, that's a blessing, man. But if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to make art now, you're kind of in for it, pretty early on. It's going to hurt a lot more. And anyway, sorry.
Just make sure your nomenclature is clear, and save every revision, know which cut you're working to, because things will come back to haunt you in the weirdest ways. On Blizzard of Souls, there was one cue that the director didn't really like that much for a particular scene. And then I get close to the final cut, and they've temped in that cue in a different spot, chopped it up, and it's like, wait, I think that's something I wrote for this other scene. And so I was able to retrace it exactly and find my sequence, and but they wanted it exactly the way that they had edited it. And that comes back to haunt you also on the original scene. There are times where the director or producer have to go through their own evolution of thought, and they'll go back, you know what? We like the version that you sent us on March 2nd. It's like, if you've changed your sequence and haven't done revisions and incremental revisions and saves and documentation of what was what, you're going to be in trouble.
Good luck. Yeah. That's a great comment. Great advice. Thank you.
We have a few more questions, trying to get through all of them. Lolita, are there exercises or disciplines you recommend doing every day, no matter what, that help you consistently to learn and improve?
Yes. I go walking for 5 miles in the morning. I have dinner with my husband. I talk to my children. I have a calendar. If I have to write I have a calendar of when I'm writing and what I'm writing. And I stick to that. And those exercises actually help my writing. That kind of discipline of schedule, because the greatest joy is to have time to write something and write something really beautiful for as far as creatively. But if I've painted myself into a corner where I feel miserable, I haven't exercised, I've been in this room, I've been obsessed with social media or what everybody else is doing, and get out of your studio, come back into your studio and think about the art that you're creating and your collaboration. That's the biggest exercise. Other than that, hey, I'm a media junkie. I love listening to other people's work. I love watching TV. I love going to the movies. I adore it. So if you love this business, be excited about it and learn from what other people are doing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you both have amazing agents, Jonathan at Kraft Angle and Bradley at William Morris Endeavor. Do you recommend working with an agent? And can you give a little advice on that? Also, how it helps your career?
Carlos, you go first.
Darn it.
Yeah, no.
I was about to do Lolita.
We have Richard on tomorrow who can talk a lot about what an agent does and how it can help.
Yeah. I think I'll.
And how it
I think the most important thing is, like, I feel like to a certain degree I'm an anomaly because I got very lucky on how I got my agent. It was while I was working with Scott Frank on his first on A Walk Among the Tombstones, and I was also mentoring through USC while I was getting my doctoral degree through their mentorship program with Randy Newman, and that was like a blessing that I was like, I could die now, I'm done, because I got to hang out, I got to see some sessions with him. And he was very kind to me with the time. Whenever he availed time, he was like, hey, come down to the studio. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to the studio with Randy. You know what I mean? And so I was total fly on the wall in that experience. But the point is that when I started working, I didn't expect to get the gig. Then I have the job. And then the producers reach out and they're like, hey, let us know your agent info so we can, get the contract and the deal going. I was like, absolutely, no problem. Because I didn't know what to do. And so I reached out to Bruno Kuhn, who was working with Randy Newman at the time. And I was like, Bruno, man, I have this situation, He goes, hey, well, let me get Randy on the phone. So Randy calls me. He goes, you got to talk to my son. I'm not going to try to imitate his voice. It's pointless. It'll be a fail. And then he goes, you got to talk to my son. I go, why? He goes, he's an agent. I go, really? And then like 15 minutes later, I got a call from Amos. And I picked up the phone and I go, hello. And he goes, a composer in need is a friend indeed. I never forgot that because I was like, just like the dad, with the sense of humor. And then and he kind of helped me with the deal. I did that thing, and then 2 years passed, and then our contract was up, and I don't know why they renewed the contract. I remember getting it, and when I got I cried because I was like at that point going, well, I had a good experience with the one movie, and I get to tell my students that this is was fun. But then they re-upped my contract. I was like, why do they do that? And then that's when I met Bradley, and who was working with Amos around the time, and this other project called Godless came on, and then I sort of just stayed with them. What I have noticed along the years is that the work should always be, or the focus of getting an agent should be to aid and abet the work you're doing. And so you have to hustle and make the relationships and bring the projects forth if you are not established. It's all you. And getting an agent will help when the deal happens, but to expect, and now I'll let the master talk, or the people that know this stuff tomorrow, of course, but to expect the agent to do all this work for you puts you in a position to feel let down. And if you feel let down, then you're going to be upset, and you're like, my agent's up. This is not what this is about. I think when you get yourself in a situation and create the reality by which they're going to start letting you know, hey, these people are interested, that will not happen if you get an agent at first. You have to think of the agent as being it's like the chicken and the egg or whatever. Having an agent helps people's perspective when they're looking to hire you. But expecting the agent to get you all the work once you get them when you're starting is kind of I think it's a fool's errand, to quote a cool line I've heard before.
But don't talk money if you don't have an agent. Get an agent, get somebody to do that talk for you. I mean, I'm thrilled to
Yep.
be with Craft Angle. Jonathan is an amazing agent. But he came to me, and kind of bringing it full circle, he came to me, he heard me speaking at an SCL event where we were honoring Shirley Walker, and he liked how I spoke in front. And so it was like, Shirley wasn't a huge fan of the idea of agents, but, of course we need agents at a certain point. But the fact that Jonathan heard me speak, and then the whole film came about, I had Blizzard of Souls, and it was kind of an incredible experience, just that how that all happened. But I tell students all the time, if you have a film, don't make sure you get somebody to look at your contract. You don't talk about money. Don't do that. You talk about creative stuff and the fun stuff.
That's yeah.
We are at the end, but I'm just wondering, we have a few more questions. Would you have 10 more minutes, and I can direct them individually so you don't have to both answer them, but
Okay.
just want to make sure we get through all of them. So Lolita,
Great.
What would you look for in a composer to accept to be their mentor, or even as an assistant? What are you looking for in a composer when you take them on to mentor them, or even to give them assistant work?
Well, for me personally, most of this mentoring has been through these programs. Like, I'm mentoring through the Alliance for Women Film Composers. I have a mentee, Catherine Chembry from Ireland, Italian composer who lives in Ireland. I'm mentoring Katerina actually. And I'm also the students at USC, and then Kubi students. So I have not had this situation where I take somebody on. So I'm not the best person to ask about that, but my advice would be, again, when I talked about looking for work opportunities, think about what you can offer to someone, and see if that person needs that. Because I understand there's this hunger, and people I just want some sort of a gig. If I get so busy that I need somebody to work for me and more people to work for me, then I will be paying you, and it won't be just a freebie mentor thing. I want to pay forward what Shirley did for me. I would do that kind of a thing. So be exceptional, be curious, and and be humble. Curious, humble, and work hard. And yeah, those are the three things.
Carlos, was there a music class you took during your education that really helped you in your career later on?
Music appreciation. I was studying accounting, and I took a music appreciation class, and that's the one that made me go into music. Because there was a teacher called Jay Brown at Miami-Dade College, and he walked around with a score. He played the Rite of Spring, which I had not registered before. And then he played the Rite of Spring he was walking around with a Dover score, which is scores that were published and available. And he showed this one moment, that were like these two notes, on paper, and trombones going, but I heard this massive sound, but it was just these two little notes going down. I was like, oh my God, that's like possible, I never even thought of it. And that class changed my life. So I mean, I went from accounting to musician. I didn't think I'd even be a composer. I was just going to start studying guitar more seriously, and then I kind of shifted in all the way. I don't even know if that's specifically answering, but that was the class that shifted the path, if you will.
Lolita, and I think we answered that already a bit, but maybe we can sum it up once again. Are there different times in my career I should be looking to be an assistant, and times I should be looking for a mentor, or take what you can get?
Take what you can get. I don't know. I would say that look for the opportunity. Take the idea of take what you can get is kind of that statement kind of turns me off. So that idea, I'm going to take what I can get. Yeah. So if I were looking for somebody to work for me, it's like, well, it's Lolita, it's not Hans Zimmer. I'll take what I can get. It's like, I don't know if I'd be that excited. I don't know if that's how it was meant, but probably not. But I would say just be excited. And I think any work that you do, you'll learn a lot. And I think, Thomas, you were the one that said, look for opportunities with non-composers. I mean, my goodness, I had one of the students didn't get a grad film that I think she wanted to get, but she signed on as a music editor on a student film. You know, so, try to learn other things. You know, be an
Yeah.
assistant to a music editor, or a fly on the wall in the animation department or something. You know.
Well, and also get involved in organizations, Alliance for Women Film Composers, SCL. Everyone needs volunteers, and there you meet other composers. And remember 6 years ago the Woman Who Score concert that the Alliance put on, and Catherine Choi helped out, assisting and getting the sheet music ready. And today she's the president of the Alliance 6 years
Yeah.
later. So
Wow.
all lead somewhere, and get involved. And I think also, what you're talking about, this philosophy of giving back. You don't have to be an established composer. You don't have to be a Carlos Rafael Rivera, Lolita Ritmanis, Hans Zimmer to give back. You can start giving back from day one. There's always opportunities, and I find that really important to get involved. And there's so many great organizations out there. So Lolita, I read the questions. I don't know how exactly it is meant. As a beginner who is intrigued by this field, I have a question about how much autonomy does a film composer have over his work? What's the hierarchy like? And I don't know if that's, and let's stay with film, because I think film, television, it's a video game, it's all a bit different. So let's stay in the film world. But I don't know if it's meant the hierarchy on the music side or with the director, producers, etc.
How much autonomy? Well, I'm not really sure exactly either what the question means. Let's just say once you get the gig, do you have control over how you handle the music management, perhaps? Could that be it? I mean, most deals are package deals. So as long as your music is, if you've been chosen to be the composer and you have that collaborative thing going back and forth creatively, you're not autonomous. You're going to be working with the filmmaker. But I do believe that within the framework of whatever your budget is, you have some, I've always had autonomy to be able to plan, am I going to use how much of the package am I going to use for an orchestra? Is there enough to even step on a recording stage? That kind of thing. So on that level, I think, that's, if that's what the question was, I think, yeah. And most people, most studios want to, as far as business stuff, want to deal with not a person, but with some sort of a corporation. So you probably need to get the business stuff in order. You need to, if you're going to have you get some business advice and PR advice and all that stuff. Have them call you, Thomas. You can figure it out.
Carlos, I think you'll be good. Beside University of Miami, what are some good grad programs for film scoring, and what should someone look for specifically when choosing one or selecting?
I think the answer is very, it's pretty clear. I think Kubi's program, Columbia, USC is strong because of location. NYU I think has a program. But it's very important to think about, what the curriculum is. I always ask, the people that are considering art school at Frost or anywhere to be thinking about what are you going to be doing? What class are you going to have to take second semester when you kind of now put your beans in that basket or whatever? I can't believe I'm like filled with like cheesy lines today. What beans in what basket? Anyway, but like when you've kind of committed to that, and you didn't really look up the curriculum, which is an annoying word, but you have to look what the plan of study. What are the courses you're going to be taking in these institutions? And the best way to edify yourself is to literally compare. Make a list of these classes I'm going to be taking while I'm there. I'm going to take these classes while I'm there. And I don't want to take underwater basket weaving. Why do I have to take underwater basket weaving? You know what I mean? Like, I'm making a joke, but I'm making a point. If you do that kind of research, that's going to be what's most helpful. I think you can go to any institution anywhere. It's what you put into it is what is going to come out. I believe in the person. I believe in the individual. I don't believe in the institution being the one that holds the key to your success. I think at best, what we all can do as purveyors of these, like looking over these programs, is to make it the most real world like experience. Like, I want to provide students from the trenches as much as I can what my mistakes have been and prepare them for what to expect on the psychological side, like Lolita said, and the the craft side. But that can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be just these sort of places that I'm recommending. There are places in Europe I have no clue about that I'm sure are fantastic. It can be in another state that's not one of the big cities that we're mentioning. It's if the teachers are doing their job and if they have the passion and care, you're going to get a great experience out of anywhere. And you on your own will be entrepreneurial enough to find and create those opportunities that will change your life. It's up to you to make. You can go to any school, but if you've got what it takes, I think I've seen that happen over the last 20 years in academia or so. It's always the individual that kind of creates that reality. So
Lolita, do you want to add to that as far as picking education and, it can be a grad school, but also later, there's so much.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have like two sides of me, the mom that was on pins and needles of like, which schools are my kids going to get into? Oh my God. I remember junior year of high school, that misery started, and are the kids, Mark and I have three kids, and like, oh, are the SAT scores high enough, and this and that, and the audition and this and that, and heartbreak and this and so really in the long term, I don't really think it really matters. It's self-motivation. On the other hand, certain places there is that networking thing, and I know, especially, I mean, one of our daughters is a dancer and a teacher, and she's actually teaching. She's chose to pursue teaching. But the musician and the two musicians, I think they're part of their success is because of the networking that they made at the more prestigious school. But I would advise film composers to don't I would not say waste. Don't put 50 grand plus into a grad program if you go there and you don't have no idea of how to sequence music, or do that homework ahead of time. So when you get to this program, you can just suck up all the energy and the educational opportunities, but not like, well, this is a click track, and this is, don't waste anybody's time. And I've seen that. I've seen where people get into these programs and they don't know how to do any of the basics. So do that on your own.
Or to even add really quick to that, it's like if you're going there to get a piece of paper, I've seen no one get work in this industry by making the dean's list ever. And so, it's like you got to be thinking like along the lines of what Lolita said. You're there for the network. You're there for the opportunities you can create for yourself. So
thank you again, both. I know we ran over, so I'm not going to do any more questions. I've answered some in the chat directly, and the sampling question, I think tomorrow the animation panel would be good for that, where we'll talk more about techniques, and this was more about mentorship. I'm so grateful to both of you for spending Saturday morning with you. For everyone out there, there's more panels come out. We start in 45 minutes with our music executive panels, who will give advice to how they, what they look for in hiring composers, and also when working with composers, what they're looking for. It's the flight attendant showrunner Steve Yockey, then Colin Fitzpatrick, music executive from Netflix, and Breaking Bad music supervisor Domas Golovic on this panel, moderated by Chandler Paul Poling. And then we have some more live panels tomorrow. So check out Perspective on Instagram and Facebook, and filmmusichouse.com. And again, a huge, huge thank you, Lolita and Carlos. Very grateful. Thanks for spending the morning with us.
Thank you.
Thrilled to talk to you, Lolita. Real privilege. And thank you, Thomas, for this. This is great. And Adonis and everyone at Perspective. Thank you. And for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.